Oh man, today we are talking about facilities, and what that means for everybody else here on the other side. Go. Welcome back, everybody, to another special episode of the South Star Classroom. We have a special guest who should not be up here just yet. And our guy David is gonna be with us, but he having some Wi-Fi issues. But before he comes back, how you doing, Omar? I love your new lavish living room. It's very nice. Do you play the grand piano back there?
Yeah, man, check out my digs, man. I got this grand piano back here, man. It's flashy, man. Listen, like I got Leopold up here. I'm gonna have the concerto tomorrow. It's dope, man. I got a brick fireplace, man. It's up there.
I mean, you doing it, bro. You doing it. You know what I'm saying?
It, man.
Like you.
I made it, man. I made it. The South Star Classroom has made it, ladies and gentlemen. No, things are good. We're back from spring break, and
okay.
You know how things go in the school world, getting back, and it's this mad rush in order to finish up the school year and get everything done. But it's like, we're like on full steam ahead. We're talking about recruitment. We're talking about our sports programs. We're talking about facilities.
Right.
I'm it's apropos that we're talking about facilities today because I'm already in phase 2 of expanding our East Side facilities. So I'm knee deep in the facilities talk today, Doc. How are you, man? What's up?
Busy. I'm exhausted. It has been kind of nonstop. I've been on the road nonstop constantly. This is my first few days in succession this month where I'm home, but it's fine. I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I'm looking forward to it. Also, just understanding from a community standpoint, like, okay, this is a very insider baseball topic. When we talk about facilities, what does that even mean? What does that mean to the average person? And maybe the average person that's not a school leader or a school board member or somebody that's worked in that capacity, they're probably like, do I have any power in this situation? What is it that I need to know? So I'm looking forward to learning with everybody else. And our guy David will be back soon. But Omar, you are here. You're gonna step up and help lead this conversation about facilities. But first, I have to bring in a very special guest. We have Miss Jamoke Hinton, all the way from her birthday to spend time with us right now, and thank you people around you for letting us share you for the next 15 minutes or so. Because your time is limited, I won't waste our time with a bunch of badgering and going back and forth. Omar, how about you just set up the conversation? Well, there's David, if we can hear him. David, do it. Say something for us, David. Let us know we got you. We don't
David,
have.
Are you alive? Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Did the aliens get
we
you?
Can hear you. We can hear you. We heard him, but it's all good. This is the beauty of live. But I'm going to bring some order back to this. So we're talking about facilities today. And Omar, can you just lay out, like, why is this facilities talk just important for our audience? And then you can bring Jamoke in and she can talk about her experiences with facilities.
Sure. So let me just branch this out into 2 divisions, right? So if you're a taxpayer, you should care because your money is buying school facilities. So on one end, if you're a traditional public school, we're going to ask the hard question of, like, who's this belong to and what kind of access should you have to this? On the charter school side, which is my side of the world, we get a different funding mechanism. We have to find our own facilities. We have to fund our own facilities. The allotment from the state is extraordinarily limited. So it then becomes a situation of, all right, if you're funding all these traditional public school facilities, why is it that the charter world is so heavily underfunded? And that brings in the Black and brown crowd because, what are we doing for our facilities, for our Black and brown schools? But as charters, we're serving mostly low-income Black and brown students. How is that equitable? So we got three major questions that we're going to ground ourselves in today. And we want to get, kind of Jamoke off to a good start. And really, Jamoke, like you were running, you were an Oakland school board. You're in charge of the money. You're helping in charge of facilities. So the first question is, who do the public school facilities actually belong to?
They belong to the people. They belong to taxpayers, as you spoke to. In this particular case, they belong to the children. The party's starting, y'all. Let's go.
Oh, Dad, I'm in the kitchen. You in the kitchen.
Listen. This is the beauty of the South Star Classroom doing this live. You get to be part of a party. You get to be part of people who threw this woman a surprise party. She didn't know that it was scheduled for the time that she was doing this episode, and people in the back are just talking and calling her. It's great. I love it. David.
So can I run on a couple, 2-3 points?
Run on a few and we'll go from there.
We need you to run before Smokey gets called out again.
I'm looking at my timing. So I actually want to start with why the school district, you asked me a question. Why do school districts exist?
So you're asking now.
That's to you. I'm asking you a question. I'm asking you a question. Why do school districts exist? School systems exist.
I mean, girl, how long do you want this show to be?
It's a simple answer. It's simple. It's really simple.
Like,
I'm gonna give you a hint. It's hella simple.
Answer,
it's like one sentence.
The simple answer you're looking for is to serve the children.
Systems, say again. I'm sorry. I thought you were
to serve the children.
I thought you were trying to go back and forth with me and not give me an answer.
No.
Answer?
To serve children.
To serve children. School systems exist so students' outcomes are improved, that their lives are viable, right? That their lives are thriving. School systems exist to improve student outcomes. So when we start talking about facilities inside of school districts, right, we can be very clear that, like, we can get down a rabbit hole of conversation about the building, the color, who's a contractor, all those things. We can go down that road. And I would suggest that it becomes a bit of a distraction for you, Omar, at times, right? How is your energy now being spent on a building versus the children inside of the building? So the world we live in, right? These school systems, these cities, municipalities have large dockets, or what would you say? They have land. OUSD, we could talk about Oakland Unified School District. We have more land than the city. We have more land than Alameda County in Oakland. So we have an asset, an incredible asset. And I would just say, again, this asset should only be in the service of children and student outcomes improving. So that's number one. So that's to all of us. Like, be mindful of how deep you go down that rabbit hole, because that's not where you're supposed to be, right? You're not supposed to be spending all your energy and time on that, right? Second piece, and this is my critique of systems when they do this split the baby around choice and around charter schools and delivery systems, right? Like, I don't care about the delivery system as much as I care about the quality of the education that you're providing, right? So we have school districts now that are holding on to, they have this land and they have the ability to actually make sure every child has a safe, secure, warm, well-lit space. In my neighborhood, my buildings have to stand up against my children being able to breathe well. I'm surrounded by freeways. So my buildings need to be in a way that, like, the windows, whatever that is, right? So that my children are actually healthy inside of that building, right? So the district has this, they have this asset. And I don't understand from a very pragmatic standpoint why you would not allow 20% of the student population of students that attend, charter schools, why we would not allow them to have 20% of the school stock, the buildings. What is the match? Here's the opportunity. And the pragmatic piece for me with the school district is you got raggedy buildings. You're not even caring for your buildings. Your buildings are old. Your buildings were built in the 50s. Your buildings don't allow for windows to even always open. Your buildings are not ready for climate crisis issues that we are dealing with. Why David don't got internet right now? Because probably it's storms and all kinds of crazy that's going on in Cali right now, right? So are our school buildings prepared and ready? So I'm gonna drop Undaunted K-12. I didn't give this to you guys before. I'm sorry, I meant to. Or actually, David, I might have emailed it to you. And this is actually a colleague of ours. Jonathan Klein is now the co-founder of it. And he's moving a whole mission around public schools in America need to be ready for climate crisis. And so the children that Omar serves, the children that we pay a lot of attention to, these brown babies, right? These brown babies need better facilities to learn in. And so what is, again, a federal kind of response to climate, a response to the underfunding of education or the lack of, focus on the children in education. So those are, like, for me, very pragmatic pieces at times where it's like, it makes more sense for me to be able to leverage from a charter school system dollars that they may have for building out facilities. A couple of last things I would say are, our young people are sitting in the middle of this battle of adults. We've had a school close in Oakland, California, Edis Academy, because it sat inside of a dilapidated church building, right? It was in the basement for years. But our city government and our school district governmental entity blocked this school from being able to purchase land that was blighted in East Oakland for them to be able to build a school, which not just a school, right? Because schools are also hubs inside of communities, right? That's where your after school program is. That's where your sports are. That's where, Yemeni women learn how to speak English. These are spaces that are about community and they're public. So we have leaders that don't care enough about children for them to be in safe and secure spaces. So that's clearly a problem. The positive that we've watched and witnessed is obviously Omar's work, right? Like what he's doing, we need to prop that up and show what he's probably learned more about real estate investment and development than he ever really wanted to know. But he knows it now. He had to know it in order to make sure those children have what they need. And I witnessed another CEO, Rich Harrison at Lighthouse Academy, Lighthouse Community Charter Schools. I should know the name of that. Sorry. But same thing, was able to go out for a bond, was able to look at like, how do I have my building? People that are also doing, again, old buildings, people are just doing basic stuff. They're like just trying to get the electrical wiring together. They're just trying to get the plumbing together, right? The ventilation systems together. Nothing sexy. Really just what are those basic things that our children need in these spaces? So again, lifting up Lighthouse, and then being able to use a public process, but also, as a public-private partnership, right? Like he went out to sell the school, and he went out and said, we are worth the investment for you. And so they gave him millions of dollars. I don't hold numbers very well, but we'll check it out. Y'all will make sure I'm double checked and triple checked. But right, like millions of dollars were provided so that he could uplift that building and rehab that building and modernize it in such a way. And so I think that it's a great asset in the school district. I mean, I know I said it was the last thing. I'm gonna get going, but that's the other thing, right? We have a structural deficit. We cut $30 to $40 million a year, right? Why are we not leasing buildings? Why are we not selling potentially buildings? I know that's but why are we not thinking about public lands for public use with a community driving that conversation? And I would say in this case, a charter community, at least in Oakland, with 14,000 students, we're a substantial community that I believe should be at the table and have a conversation about raggedy buildings in OUSD, where you actually, that they have, the last thing I'll say really too is they lost millions of dollars. I actually probably know this number. It's like one school lost like 20 million, another school lost like 40 million, another school, the Baytech, Prop 51 in California allows for these people to actually rehab OUSD buildings and be in them. And you know, OUSD did, ignored them, walked around the issue, went back and forth, and they lost millions of dollars that would have been available for young people in these schools.
And Jamoke, we don't have the strongest signal, but we appreciate that download. And you are definitely welcome to come on back in when you can, any old time. You gave us a good point to jump off of. And so go enjoy your people. Tell your people we said hey, and thank them for letting us have you for a little
Smokey,
bit.
We say hello, man. We want to know who Smokey is.
Now, real quick, thank you, Mo. Now, that was a lot, y'all. So that was a lot, and I think it was a lot of. If you don't work in education, if you don't run schools, if you don't know the California context, there was a lot that she just said there. David, we need you to make that let's make it a little plain so folks can join us in the in the conversation.
Okay, I'm going to do my best with my working Wi-Fi or lack thereof. Can you hear me okay?
Indeed, we got your back, man.
Wonderful. All right. Well, good to see you all, and thanks to Jamoke for joining us. I think the big question here is public school facilities, and who are they really for? And not just the actual buildings, but also access to both other public and private ways of raising money. And we're talking specifically about public charter schools, right? So district schools have access to buildings. They have access to funding, to parcel taxes, facility bonds. And these are things, it's different in every state, but these are generally things that private schools struggle with, right? And so the real question is, let's say in El Paso, or let's say in Oakland, or let's say in Los Angeles, or New York City, right? You are a taxpayer. We all pay taxes, whether we like it or not. And you have children and you pay into a system. The question is your child entitled to a public school facility that was paid for by your own tax money? That's the question. Like, who gets to make that decision? You can imagine living in a world where, let's say, Charles, in your neck of the woods in Chicago, there's a public park, but then, you for some reason, your kids can't attend that public park. They have to go to another public park, even though it's public. Or any kind of public infrastructure. We're talking about schools, but what are the ramifications? What are the challenges that are brought up when we start to run this kind of two-tiered system in the public space, right? And focus on what we're focused on today is facilities. And I know Omar's had his fair share of struggles around facilities as well. So that's really what we're talking about. Like, who gets to make those calls around who gets full access to public goods, and we're talking about public buildings.
Okay, go ahead. Oh, you were about to jump in there.
No, yeah, man. Listen, like, it's hard to contextualize. So if you're a parent and you're like, why should I care? Like, I don't know, man. Like, you're paying money, so you're paying all this tax money, and look, some of y'all are very benevolent and you're going to say, well, I'm paying this tax money because I care about kids, my kids, and other community kids, right? In terms of facilities buildings, one of the nuances, you live in a really good neighborhood, that money from your taxes is going to get pulled in and it's going to serve your neighborhood schools. So your neighborhood schools are good. What happens in like a place like El Paso, where like you have a low income neighborhood and those property taxes aren't as good, that school is not as good. So this becomes a fight because those low income parents are being like, we don't have computers, we don't have resources, our buildings are garbage, no one's paying attention to us, we should get equal allocation of resources. And like, if you're a listener, you're probably saying to yourself, well, yeah, like, isn't that fair? Isn't that why the school districts are here? But you got parents screaming up and down, being like, oh, what are you doing? Like, that money's for our neighborhood. That's why we live in this neighborhood. So we got to have the fancy school. And while we have a pool, the gymnasium, and all the wonderful things. And by the way, those nice schools, oftentimes, ladies and gentlemen, to answer David's first question, you see a bunch of people at. So they're using their track. They may be using that pool like, in off hours. They're utilizing that football field. They're utilizing those tennis courts, right? But if you're in a not so great school, like, how is the public really utilizing that? And then because it may be dangerous, that place is completely fenced off. So it's a very simple question to our audience to say, have we had a proper discussion about where your tax money is going? And thus, who is the real owner? Is it the state? And they get to dictate what you get to do. So it's kind of like that example that David said about a park. Say, hey, you gave all this money for a park. We can't come to this park. You got to go to the crappy park. You can't go to the good park. And imagine the uproar if you were basically told, sorry, you can't access the good park. Well, that's what's going on with our kids. They can't access the good schools. They're stuck at the crappy park. Is it the state's decision? Or is it your decision as a parent, as a taxpayer, to say, this is a public facility, we should be asking for more and being able to utilize it? And one quick example is like, I open up my school to the community to use for free all the time. I've had more movies shot at EPLA than I think all of California has had in the last year, because they ain't filming in California anymore, man. I'm not lying. Like, I've got movie shoots going on and I don't charge a dime because it's a free public facility. And that's a beautiful community endeavor. There are local cats. That's a good example of a public space being used for the community, right? So David, I don't know if that answers your question, but it begs the question of like, yeah, man, it's a really good ass question. Who owns this and who should own it? I don't know. Do you have like a particular sentiment or feeling about like who owns this shit?
I think it's a few different things. I think that this is an education friendly show. This is a sector friendly show, meaning we support you if you're in traditional schools, charter schools, private schools, whatever. I think that there are people though that may not care about none of this, and I think that what they might say is they'll be like, tough. There's a lot of things that my taxes pay for that I'll never benefit from. So I pay into a bunch of things, right, that I don't really get to have access to. So what it's sounding like as a community member is like, okay, look, there's a larger, broad issue. And the issue is that traditional schools, which are public schools, get they got land, they have facilities. Charter schools are also classified as public schools for the most part. I think there's a few cases in very other specific places where it might be whatever, right? Yes. But for the vast majority of people, charter schools are public schools. And what I'm hearing and what you're saying is to a community, hey, if you have a kid that's in a charter school, you're considered a charter school, it is not fair that they don't have access to these public facilities that the charter of the land is basically saying you have to make available. So for instance, in California, for people listening, when a school doesn't have full capacity, let's say a school can hold 600 people, it only has 200 students. They have to open up and offer that space to charter schools in the area because all public school kids are deserving of a fair, adequate space in order to do the business of education. And it sounds like charter schools have not had protections there, and they tend to get the shaft. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Oh yeah.
So I guess what the question is that we're having this facilities conversation because if like what Jamoke said is making sense to me. If all the kids are public school kids and all the public school kids are our kids, why is it that this section of kids not being able to have that? And if one of the critiques is that these charter schools are not serving SPED kids well, or kids with special needs. And what she was saying was, well, one of the problems is you don't have money to modify the church basement that you might be doing classes in, or the back of that store, or where JW Newberry used to be in downtown Oakland. They had a charter school used to do classes in that abandoned warehouse. So now we are having this conversation around, okay, just general facilities. So my question to you guys, David and Omar. So I'm a parent, and maybe my kid goes to a traditional school, and this isn't necessarily the issue, but what power do I have, or what if I want to be involved, or like why, you know what I'm saying? Like, why should I not click off of this? Like, why should I be worried about what's going on with those kids and those facilities?
I'll take a shot at that. Let me know if you can't hear me.
You're good. I'll tell you if we can't.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying like not to move my body too. I don't know if that helps or not. It doesn't. Anyway,
I think that's just a superstition, man. I think you're good.
Right.
If we lose you, we'll just bring you back.
Okay. I mean, I think it calls into the fundamental question. It's really it's an issue of power and politics and where decisions get made and who makes them. So who's actually making the calls? And it's not in every region. There are some regions where there's great cooperation, and charter schools do have access to both public and private ways of building facilities. But in those areas where it is challenging to for access, right, where are those decisions happening? And so that's why I think this is a universal issue, because it comes down to it's a special interest issue, right? Are they labor unions? Are they lobbyists that are, somehow able to convince politicians and decision makers that charter school students are not full human beings and therefore do not deserve access to public resources, right? And that you could look at that in terms of healthcare. You could look at that in terms of housing. You could look at that in terms of access to financial capital and loans. You could look at that through housing. I already said housing, but it's really a universal issue about the power of special interests. And at the end of the day, what this is doing to children in Oakland, in Los Angeles, in New York, in so many other areas is people are forced to send their children to schools that are not updated. They don't have good HVAC systems. Some of them might not even be in school facilities. They might be in a church. They might be in a mall. We've all talked about the mall charter school, right? I believe that's the more universal fundamental issue.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think I could expand infinitely about this topic, man, but like a couple of concrete things. One, if there's a facility that's underutilized, like in a traditional facility, right? And it's a neighborhood school, the school district's really got two decisions. One, shut it down. But now everyone's up in arms. Like, y'all heard this, like people go crazy when they're shutting down a facility because like, you're shutting down our neighborhood school. And it's like, well, it was a school built for 3,000 people. You got like 800 people there, right? But the problem then becomes, well, we're not going to lease half of this school to a charter school because the charter schools are the enemy. We're now providing for our competition and they're going to take all of our kids. And like, look, like if you guys were kicking ass, then those charter schools wouldn't be taking your kids. Like parents wouldn't be making that choice with their feet to make that decision. But the irony is, if that charter school came in and shared that building, that neighborhood school gets to stay. And now you've now brought in another occupant that is using that facility. Money is being spent intelligently. Your kid gets to stay in the neighborhood school. And under the most miraculous circumstances, if those two schools ever got together and were like, yo, we should work together and help all of our kids. Now, all of a sudden, this school becomes magnificent because those shared practices from the traditional and the charter are coming together, and that school becomes great. So it leans into David's discussion of there are political reasons to make dumbass decisions. And the political reasons just fear. Like, we don't like charter schools, we don't trust them. And it's like the logic would say, if you rented this out to a charter school, not only do you get to save that school, not only does the district make the money, not only does the school stay open, but then the best practices could be flowing back and forth from those campuses and it allowing all these kids to flourish. And now you got some real options. You got this traditional option, you got this charter option, and the best case of scenarios, you don't know either. So the thing that kills me is that that's the constant critique of the charter school. And then to boot, we don't get jack of funding. So when people are like, Omar, like, you in a charter school, you must get a bunch of help from the state to open up the facility. And I'm like, no. So for those of you in the audience, and I don't want to go into like a bunch of like, ed talk about the facilities in the charter world, but like we out here on our own, like Doc always says. Yeah. And when I say we out here on our own, it's like I had to find the facility, like literally me, not like I as in my team or anybody else. Like now I've got a team. Now we're working on like, combining those resources. But like who found our first school? Like I had to find that site. Who found the site and the land and the architect and all the general contractors for our second and third school? Like me. Who had to get the money for that school? Me. Like I had to go out and find companies that would lend us the money. So it's not like, oh, Omar, you got a school and the state's coming in, they're giving you a facility and they're helping you out with all this stuff. So when the school districts are like, yeah, we're not going to help you with an abandoned building. I'm like, what kind of Scooby-Doo abandoned warehouse shit is this, dude? Like, I can fill that school up and help you make a ton of money, but the political reasons are saying, no, it's odd. And I think that everyone should have a guff and a fight in this scenario, because why it matters is because your school district is making some bum-ass decisions about your local school and your local facilities based on petty politics. And that's my hot take on that one.
Got you.
You know what I'm saying?
I got some thoughts, but David, I mean, we open it up to you, David. You lead, you guiding us on this one.
Yeah. So moving away from the technical pieces here, really, I mean, in my opinion, this is about human beings, right? And what particular human beings deserve. And what we've seen, not everywhere, but it's been my lived experience, intentional efforts to dehumanize public charter school students, right? By bashing on charter schools without realizing that those are actually like real Black and brown children that live in the same neighborhoods that the Black and brown children that attend district schools live in. That's the real issue. That's the root cause here, is an attempt to dehumanize these children and their families for whatever reason, because they've made a choice to attend a charter school. At a recent board meeting in Oakland, California, this is a couple of days ago, they're talking about facilities, and this is a time of the year when charter schools get offers to have access to the district buildings. And there is so much fear in the room from people that are working in a district school that has 200 kids that was made for 800 kids. The fear that a charter school is going to come in and take over. A quote, so we're talking about humanizing young people. A quote from one of the teachers from an Oakland public school, her suggestion was that we put all of the charter schools and the charter school children in tents. Let's make tents for them. That way they can have access to basically shelter. When I hear tents, I think of the Holocaust. I think of Japanese internment. I think of what happened to the Native Americans on reservations, right? That's the language that is being used right now to dehumanize Black and brown children in Oakland, and it happened in LA too. This is what like woke, progressive, left politics sounds like in 2023.
I got you. So, I mean, I guess I'm listening to this, and here's what I'm hearing. If you're a charter leader and you've chosen to lead charter schools, here's a trade-off, right, that we have to just accept, and this is just brass tacks. You chose to lead that sector because it gives you a different level of autonomy. It gives you a different level of agency, and you want to be able to deliver curriculum the way that you want to be able to do it. You want to be able to hire and fire the way that you want. And one of those trade-offs, if you want to lead that, is that you have to be also a public relations person. You don't have a district apparatus that is behind you necessarily, that is putting out propaganda or that is like informing the public of the complexities of that which it takes in order for you to lead your school. So I would say in the type of situation like this, if you are a charter leader, you cannot absolve yourself from explaining these situations. You have to be out in the street saying, yo, my kids are kids just like yours. Like they deserve this and they deserve that. And, you know, the same way I want the best for your students over there. Like you have to be that vocal mouthpiece is what I am hearing. What I'm hearing, if you are a charter school parent, is that you also have to be ringing that bell and just kind of saying, look, we want to make sure our kids get the best shake and opportunity at things. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm just asking for humane treatment under the treaties like that cities and states and municipalities have already set. So California already has that rule, but it's discouraging if in California, for instance, if school leaders and students are coming to look at a space and they are being protested against by fellow students, and we're not talking about private school kids, we're talking about kids that are their peers that are like on the same socioeconomic level, it could be a traumatizing and disheartening experience. That's what I'm getting from this talk about facilities, is a deeper call to action for people who have chosen the autonomy of this sector. But here's one of the trade-offs that other people might not have to do. That is just me as a listener trying to absorb, you know, all this information. As Omar is going through backgrounds and changing it up.
Yeah, I mean, charter schools in and of themselves, you know, are not a divisive instrument. But what is divisive is when leadership in charter schools, and it goes both ways, when leadership in charter schools does not work with district leadership, and when district leadership does not work with charter school leadership. That is where that is the crux of the division. And so, you know, there are places where these things happen and it works for all kids, and there are places where it doesn't happen. I mean, some more examples, and again, I'm very familiar with California. You want to know how hot this issue of co-location or giving a charter school a public school facility is. Some of the demands for many of our large major teacher unions, LAUSD, Oakland Unified, some of their demands to come back to in-person learning from COVID was to end all co-locations. What does that have to do with COVID? If you want to think about how ridiculous this conversation has become, right? Yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
They put it in writing.
Oh, and by the way, just for those listening, Oakland had OUSD teachers had a demonstration today as well, a Wildcat march, where they kind of walked out together at a certain time. It's kind of the light. It's the warning that a larger strike may be coming. So just FYI for the purposes of this conversation.
That's a good point. And so we're
talking
about buildings.
Didn't LA go on strike recently?
Oh, it's a religion now, brother. It is a tradition.
LA
like
just went on strike. LA went on strike for 3 days. Yeah. And today, Oakland did a wildcat strike with minimal notice to families. So children, again, are at home, many unsupervised.
Can you explain a wildcat strike for the people, David?
Yeah.
A wildcat strike is essentially an unauthorized strike. It's not anything that's like written into collective bargaining process. It's like a preemptive action, what Charles said. And so we're not getting off topic because we're gonna do a quick Oakland deep dive right now. You imagine like the crime in Oakland, California right now is out of control, right? And unfortunately, young people are getting caught up in it. And so Black and brown youth, right? And so let's close the schools down and let's put the kids out on the street, right? Again, because we know when crime happens, what are the hours? What are the conditions, right? And I just think it's crazy. It's not impacting the charter schools yet. But yeah, we're looking at we just had a 3-day strike in Los Angeles, shut down all the schools, and we're looking probably at another one in Oakland. So, if they don't want to run the schools, if they don't want to, run them themselves, maybe they should open up the schools for people that will keep them open. How about that?
Man,
I mean, that's
wild. Go ahead, O.
No, I was just gonna say, listen, like for those in the audience who may like not have all the nuance and stuff, and I don't want to berate this comment, they may not know that like charter school funding for facilities is totally different from traditional school funding for facilities. The equity is off the charts off. So like you got tax money, property tax money, bond money, all this money to pay for all these facilities. And what I think Jamoke was saying is like, you got all this money, and then what happens? You're not upkeeping the facility. You're not allowing the public to use that facility. And then you're going on strike and then sending kids out. So like even the kids aren't using the facility. And I think what David is saying is like a cat like me, who's like, yo, like I'm paying so much money and spending so much of my time, not on the curriculum, not on the education, not on the interventions for students and the culture, on the business side of finding land, procuring a facility, finding the funding for that facility, the philanthropy for that facility. It's like, yo, like we could take on that facility, and ultimately to like reassure David's statement, it's like, yeah, like, and then we'd keep it open because we understand that that facility is meant for the community and meant for our kids. And when teachers are going out on strike, they're sending kids home in a like radically difficult proposition. Look, I get it. We were one of the very first schools to come back in person during the COVID time because I understood the implications of our families not having a place to send their kids while they're working 2 to 3 jobs. I understand the implications of kids not being supervised for 8 hours a day. I understand the implications of the neighborhood that those kids live in, where ultimately they're getting caught up, as David so eloquently said, in like street life. And look, maybe if y'all are like, in well-to-do, like upper middle class neighborhoods, maybe like super nice middle class neighborhoods, maybe your kids, if they're not being supervised, are like either up to cheeky shenanigans or like at somebody else's house or in a pod or, like playing sports in the backyard and stuff. Like, all right, cool. Maybe it's not a big deal for you. But in the kinds of neighborhoods that we know our kids live in, like gang life is not only a real thing, they're out there recruiting. And when kids don't have enough things to do, and Doc, this ties right into the entire discussion about after school programs. If kids don't have things to do and a place to go, the inevitability of all that energy, crime, drugs, and entering into the gang life. And like that should horrify any one of you who is listening, because like that affects your community as a whole. That affects your crime rates, that affects your income rates, that affects the long-term longevity of your community is completely beholden on whether or not our kids are getting educated or not. So when you think, how does this pertain to me?
Yep.
Like, unless you're like 80 years old and I'm like, I don't know, I'm going to be dead in a year. Like, I don't know, you should give a shit, because that will absolutely affect everything in your community, from things like drug dealing to petty crimes to robbery to essentially murder. And this is the kind of life that like kids get caught up in. And it circles back to the fact that like, yo, if we just had some nice ass facilities and some kick ass after school programs, we'd solve most of these issues. But we're sitting here fighting and arguing with one another about charter or public or whatever, and not really providing adequate facilities for either. And I think that's my guff. It's like, we're not actually solving the problem. We're just making it worse. And I think that's what we're seeing in Oakland, right? Tying all that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I hear that. I think what I'm hearing is that charter leaders, charter educators, charter parents and students need to just be more vocal. What I'm hearing is there's a lot of things, right? When we talk about this, I don't think that we talk enough to the general public about just the vast economic centers in which schools are in communities, and what kind of goes into that. And that includes this facilities conversation, that includes who gets contracts and things like that, who's been you know, if you work in a district, who's unionized and been a part of the union for X amount of years or whatever the case is. I think that these are heady conversations that's difficult to have in the general public. And I think part of the reason it's so heady, and this is me pushing on the charter sector, I think they have to do a better job of talking to people the way that we're talking to them now, and explaining the nuances of why these things are important, explaining the nuances and saying we are a part of this community and we're going to fight to be a part of this community. We're going to show up and we want you to treat us like we're a part of this community. I think there's a, like, as David said earlier, there's a dehumanization campaign that has been happening very successfully for more in the last decade, more in the last 2 decades, where people are not looking at charter school kids like regular kids. They're not looking at charter school educators like regular educators. They're not looking at charter school leaders like regular leaders. They're looking at them like pariahs. They're looking at them as if they're stealing something, as if they don't belong, or as if they somehow took something that wasn't theirs. And I think that if that's the apparatus for education in which you choose to be a part of, you now have a duty. Maybe it's not going to be a duty in 20 years, but right now, you have a duty to better educate the community on what you are and what you're trying to do, because that other side, that traditional side, that union side, that side that hates charter schools and sees it as the demise of traditional public education, they have bastardized all the terms that you use. They have bastardized everything that you have wanted to do. They've bastardized it so well that we are okay with kids doing classes in the back of an abandoned grocery store, as opposed to having regular facilities. And that's your fault. And that's your fault. And every time you say, I'm just going to put my head down, I just want to do the work, that's your fault. Every time that, as an educator, when they say all the educators raise their hand, you raise your hand and get that love, and then somebody say something about charters and you quiet as a mouse, that's your fault. When you are ashamed or you are afraid to speak up for what you do, then you validate the mistreatment. And in this instance, for this episode, that just happens to be that in which we see it through the lens of facilities. But it's a larger conversation in facilities. That's how I am seeing and taking in this conversation, because this is a tough episode to do, fellas, because there's so much education that has to happen that it's hard to wrap it in a nice bow, be entertaining, be pithy, and be quick, because there's just some stuff that's going to feel like insider baseball. So, you know, we appreciate you all sticking with us today on this topic, because it's a tough topic, but it's an important topic, and it is a tent pole that is letting you know just how welcome or unwelcome your kids, your students. I mean, well, that's the same. How your students, your educators, your parents, and your faculties are that are trying to just simply educate kids. And you got to do something about it. So I'm calling out the sector that I'm very friendly with to the carpet, because this is your fault.
I appreciate that. Gents, I got to bounce. I just want to thank our audience so much for sticking with us on a very, very, very difficult topic. Listen, like, I'm in the charter world. We could use all the support we could get. It's something that we advocate immensely for. But I think this boils down to one hardcore issue, is that people are allowing the dehumanization of your children and the children in your community. And like David brought it up, and I'm like, for all of these like liberal folks who are like screaming about equity and equality and all these buzzwords and talking about how they want a more equitable society, like, where are you?
Oh, good, man. Hey, go to your board meeting, man. Best of luck, bro.
Thanks, y'all. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
No problem, man. So Well, I mean, we're up on the final thoughts anyway, brother. So I mean, let me know. So I mean, again, kudos to you for bringing up a topic that definitely needs some room to breathe and some air and all that good stuff. But it's a tough topic. But I appreciate you being willing to tackle it. How you want to close us out on this, man?
I mean, I've got some thoughts real quick, and I've also been struggling with my connection. So I'm like, I wish I had good Wi-Fi now, and I don't. But it's almost over. I would say, yeah, we started with what is a very technical topic, and we've worked our way through the technical topic around public school facilities. Who are they for, and why, and who gets to make those decisions? And then we've moved back towards this thing that happens with, people speak ill on public charter schools, in the process dehumanizing children that attend charter schools. That's really what it is. That's really what it's about. You brought up the good point, Charles, around making sure that or identifying the issue when charter school leaders and people that lead in the sector are not vocal around these issues. When you are not vocal, when you don't tell your story, somebody will tell it for you, and they're not going to tell it in a way that it needs to be told. But the anti-charter school narrative has been put out there. It's incredibly powerful. Nobody's even talking about it now, given this school choice red state resurgence, right? We're still not talking about ourselves in the space. And I think that's an issue. So for me, where we started around facilities takes me back to like advocacy, and how can we be better advocates? How can our leaders be better advocates? How can our teachers and our parents be better advocates? I know the National Parents Union is doing some work, but I think a much larger national call to action around advocacy, so we can protect and also build and grow what we have access to in terms of resources is a good one. That's where I'm ending up. So,
got you.
Yeah.
Well, nah, man, I appreciate it, man. I think in my final thought, I would just say I'll keep you up here on the screen. I think that this is an issue that's indicative of larger issues. I think that if your kid goes to one of those schools, you still deserve a great facility. You still deserve all the freedoms and rights that the rest of the kids around you have. But it's going to take work. Things are not fair. We're not talking about fair. We're not talking about what should be. We're talking about what is. And right now, that's the reality. But we got to stop treating this thing. If people want this sector to grow and innovation to grow and for choice to continue to grow and to eventually flourish, then you got to stop being ashamed to talk about it. You have to talk about it with some pride. And on the inside, you have to, check for quality control within your own camp. I think the biggest critic of charter should be charter leaders. I think that that is how you build something where it's not just dogmatic, but it is a system that is actually offering the refuge that it promised to offer. That helps build a system that brings forth the innovation that it was built to bring forth. And until that happens, until people, say one thing in a charter meeting and then act like it's the scarlet letter outside of being around friendlies, you're going to keep getting this. And I would just say, if you're afraid to stand up for what's right in these moments, then your parents and your students shouldn't respect you. They shouldn't entrust their kids with you. They shouldn't put their faith in your ability to educate and to lead. Because you don't have the courage of your convictions. And I don't know if that's who I would want being in charge of my kids. So charter leaders, you are at a moment. And that moment is, will you speak up? Will you speak out on behalf of your families and what you're doing if you think it's the best stuff to do? Or won't you? And we'll keep having those conversations here at the South Star Classroom. For Jubilee and Omar, we want to be very thankful to our gracious guest Jamoke and wish her a happy birthday on her special day. That's David. I'm Charles, and we will see you all same bat time, same bat station next week. Until then, take care of each other and take care of yourselves. Peace.